Hello and welcome to another edition of the Steelers Depot live stream. I am Alex Kozora. Joining me is Dave Bryan, SteelersDepot.com, here for the next hour till 8 p.m. Eastern Time, answering whatever is on your mind. And I can take a guess what's on your mind today, the same as Dave and I, as the Blockbuster Monday, as it shall be known, at least deemed by me 8 seconds ago, where Minkah Fitzpatrick goes back to Miami, Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith come to Pittsburgh, and a couple of 2027 Day 3 selections get swapped. So, Dave, who would have guessed Minkah Fitzpatrick didn't last as long as Cordero Patterson on the Steelers roster? But here we are, Dave. How you doing?
Yeah, interesting day for sure, and I'm just thankful overall it kind of broke the way it did. We had that interview with Jay Morrison talking about the Bengals this morning, and we got wrapped up with that. As soon as we wrapped up with that, then the news broke before you and I even started our segment of the podcast. Had we not had that interview lined up, we would have probably been off the podcast, and with things that have happened like that before, where the news breaks, where we get done. But luckily we were able to kind of delay our version of the podcast and get that all covered, and then insert the interview with Jay at the end of it there. So it's been a crazy day. I'm sure people got a lot of questions, and heck, I still got a couple of questions as well moving forward in this thing. But I'm not sure this will be a day that many of us soon forget. And now just waiting, I guess, at this point to see more of the exact kind of financials of the Jonnu Smith contract and how that be laid out with the extension, and the exact amount of money that Miami's going to eat of Jalen Ramsey, and what the Steelers are going to do, maybe prorating some of that money for 2025, and get a firm lay of the land as far as the cap situation goes. So monumental day. So where shall we start?
Be sure to get your questions in for Dave and I. We'll answer as many as we can until top of the hour. If you want a guarantee of your question being asked and answered by Dave and myself, you can send us a super chat. Move to the front of the line. No obligation to do so. We appreciate the super chats all the same. Be sure to like this video. Of course, check out the site, SteelersDepot.com. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channels. Dave, the saying, and at risk of me mixing up sayings like I did on the podcast earlier today, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen, and it's an off season where it feels like decades have happened as Pittsburgh makes another aggressive move, trading Minkah, acquiring Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. So let's dive right on into your questions. And one non-Minkah related question from Rage Dia 237 is how we'll start things off. He says, before we get to the Minkah Ramsey crazy hypothetical, how would you feel about the NFL allowing multiple forward passes in one play? We'll say 2 for now, but if that's not too crazy, why not more? Dave, what's your take?
I mean, I've never really even given that a thought. I mean, we've seen obviously quarterbacks throw passes and get batted back and catch it, and have they thrown it again in that situation?
In what situation?
I'm trying to remember where a quarterback gets it batted back to his face and he catches it.
I don't believe. I know they've had touchdowns. Brett Favre, I think Marcus Mariota, but completions to themselves. I don't think there's been another throw. Is that even 100% legal? Would that be considered a forward pass?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there's even an instance. Trying to remember back to the rules. I guess it's not, but I haven't given it multiple thoughts at all. I guess the question is, would we ever see anything like that? And then would we?
Would you want to see it?
Would you want to see it? How often would you have the time to do something like that? I mean, you already see in some instances that first backward pass to a player, right? Or an end around flip or something like that, and then a throw. I mean, I wouldn't imagine you'd see it any more than you already do when it comes to like the first pass being a backwards pass.
Yeah, I'm all for creative thoughts, but I'll pass. Miss me with the 2 forward passes. I do think the NFL should have a lateral-based offense. I pushed for that for many years now. The Chiefs and Travis Kelce in particular mess with that a little bit. I'll sign up for that, but not the 2 forward passes. I'll do laterals all day, though. All right, let's get into some of the Minkah questions. This one comes from Mike Adesso. He has maybe more commentary here. He says, Steelers got better today. End of story, but man, I hate seeing Minkah go. kind of telling, though. Now, stories coming out about him and miscommunication seems like he's getting tossed under the bus. The one thing that is absolutely fact now is no one, not you guys, not the media, especially fans, can never say, no, the Steelers won't do that move to anything in the future. These aren't your father's Steelers. Mike, to that last point, you're right. Nothing should be considered off the table for a team that has shown time and time again this offseason under Omar Khan, they're not afraid to make radical moves.
I do think when it comes to that, even though we can no longer say, they no longer did, several of these kind of moves, and especially in one season. I mean, heck, you even talk about going out there and trading for a wide receiver like DK Metcalf, giving up a second-round pick and then turning around and giving him a lucrative deal, top of the market, near top of the market for wide receiver and all like that. A lot of this, and we've talked about this a few times on the podcast as well too. A lot of this is I think, a byproduct of this team just not drafting well, first and foremost, because look, I mean, had Kenny Pickett worked out, you're probably spending a lot of cash and cap space on a lucrative contract for him. Obviously, geez, I mean, just look at the low amount of players that have got second deals. They obviously drafted George Pickens, and they didn't want to give him that money. And when you roll back to last year being the first year of the 3-year cash spending cycle in the CBA, they were below league average in that. And if you look back to even the 3-year cycle before that, they tend to, the middle year of that 3-year cycles is usually when they try to make up ground and spend more than 100%. And they didn't have players under contract, or ones that they drafted that they were up on giving that money to. And if you're not going to give it to George Pickens and you need a wide receiver, I mean, you almost were forced in a situation because you had to spend the cash. And then fast forward to now, here's the thing: when I think when the dust settles with this whole Jonnu Smith and the Jonnu Smith, even if Jonnu Smith was the only trade that would have happened, that was kind of fathomable just because the buzz and the link back to Arthur Smith and Jonnu, and the fact that Arthur Smith likes to have use the multiple tight end personnel. That was kind of maybe at least easier to kind of foresee or think plausible happen. Now, the thing with Ramsey and Fitzpatrick, once again, once all this cycles out, I think you're going to see both the cap space and the cash spending come in, not the same, but what I think you're going to see is the cap space, they come out maybe saving a little bit on cap space, but end up spending a little bit of extra cash, in totality, as opposed to just Minkah. And once again, this team was in a situation where they had to spend more cash this offseason. And look, I think one of the bigger takeaways here is this team didn't have to give up 2026 draft capital to get any of this done. So the talk is still in play for this team doing whatever potentially in the first round to move up however much they might deem that they need to, should a franchise quarterback in the draft be on the table here. But I mean, I think in totality, as we said on the podcast this morning, there's been a lot of these, that in and of itself is kind of a stop the presses type thing. And you've had multiple of those things, even the Deshaun Elliott thing, contract extension. That's just not something that we see a lot of. Now, obviously, he played himself, had a great season, and it made a lot of sense regardless of whether or not the team had done it before and regardless of where the team sat in cash and cap to go ahead and lock a player like that up. I guess what I'm getting at is this was an exception to many rules this offseason. But I'd hold my breath in thinking every offseason we're going to see like five of these kind of things happen. At least a minimum, we know that as long as Omar Khan is in charge, however much longer that is going forward, if they were to get themselves in a cash spending situation again, that they're not above doing things like they've done this offseason.
Sure, you wouldn't expect 5 things to happen in future off seasons, but any one thing seems like it could happen in a future off season where any move, any plausible acquisition, or any blockbuster deal feels like it could be in play. It can't be the Steelers don't do it this way. They trim around the edges. They're methodical. They don't make that big splash. They build just through the draft. That's not how Omar Khan is operating. I don't think this was about cash. I don't think the communication aspect that Mike referenced is the core of it. We see on screen Patrick Queen replying to one Twitter user today saying that Minkah was not the guy out of position. Now, he's not going to throw Minkah under the bus, I don't think, but he didn't have to respond to this guy and go out of his way to rebuke and shut down that thought. I'm still searching for the reason why Minkah was the guy out. And the answer I'm coming back to in my head right now is the simplest one. It is Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is often the most correct one. They didn't think Minkah Fitzpatrick was the Minkah Fitzpatrick of old. That he was not going to return to his splash ways, and they want to try to find some guys who can offer a greater impact.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder, and we talk about this on the podcast, how much does Minkah wanted to get back to Minkah ball last year, and we see how that kind of played out. And he only has 2 takeaways in the last 2 seasons, and albeit he did miss 6 games or so that previous to last season, you do kind of wonder if the very thing that got Minkah kind of shipped out of Miami initially, how much of maybe some of a similar thing got him shipped back to Miami this offseason. There's more. There's probably a little bit more to this story in some way, shape, or form. And no, I don't think Minkah requested a trade, and I think you made a good point as well too, going back to the pre-draft visits and all. This team did seem to pay attention to some safeties and some early round safeties at that. So could the seed at least have been planted in the organization's head early in the offseason that there is at least a potential that they would entertain trading Minkah away? And it will be interesting to hear Minkah talk to the Miami media whenever that happens for the first time, whether that be at the start of training camp or next week or whenever. I do think there is another layer to this outside of just wondering if Minkah can live up to the $15.5 million that he was set to earn this year.
Fair. And I just hope we can find out some information about what that deeper layer is, if there is one. Let's get to a super chat. I want to get to it. There's a storm rolling through because it's stormed endlessly in Pittsburgh this year. Another very generous super chat from Tony Anderson, $100. I don't see a question here associated with that, but Tony's been a big-time MVP these last couple of live streams. So give a shout out to Tony in the chat if you guys could. We appreciate that, Tony. Extremely, extremely generous, and means a lot on a day that was very busy for Dave and I and our entire site. So we do appreciate the very, very kind super chat. You of what is this? You of K Steele says, who believes what Queen says in reference to him saying that Minkah was not the communication problem? You don't have to, but I'll trust the player. Again, going out of his way, didn't have to answer the question. If he thought Minkah was an issue, he could have ignored it and not responded, obviously. So it's a hot take, but I'm going to say the player that knows Minkah and played on this defense and centered this defense and was the hub of communication has a good feeling about why Pittsburgh had breakdown issues. Now, I don't absolve Minkah completely of it. I think there's plenty of blame to go around for the communication issues last year. That is a team thing. That's a coaching thing. That's why you've seen some of the changes that got made. But if Queen says that Minkah was not the root cause, I believe him. All right, let's go to our next super chat, or not next super chat, but next question. If we get a super chat, we'll certainly get to that as well. Steel Josh 36 says, as soon as I read the news on my phone, I turned to look at my framed signed Minkah photo of the pick 6 he had against Indy in 2019. Sad day. What was it you feel made him expendable from Pitt's point of view? So kind of goes to what I talked about, Dave, that maybe they thought he was not the impact player that he once was.
Yeah, and then, if he didn't have a rebound season, something to the tune of 5 takeaways or so, and if he only just matched his numbers that he put up last year, which I mean, still obviously got him into the Pro Bowl, which we all know is kind of a popularity contest and all like that. But I mean, the what Minkah was always attached to during his first few seasons with the Steelers were those splash plays, were those takeaways, were those interceptions, were those forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, the pick sixes, those kind of things there. And you would have gone through this season with Minkah having 1 year left on his contract. Then there would have been all that talk about, is he wanting an extension, expecting an extension? At least now you don't have that to go through. But I do think when you do boil this down to the fact that they do wonder whether or not he can get back to being as impactful of a playmaker from more of a tied to the post type situation. And if moving him along, regardless of how things shake out at the free safety position, will this defense be less predictable? Will they have more moving chess pieces? Will they actually be a better defense overall, even without having, a former All-Pro cornerstone type player like Minkah on this team? Because obviously you're bringing in a guy like Jalen Ramsey who could just as easily get you 7, 8, 9 interceptions, on the high side, maybe at the least 4. And we talked about a couple of podcasts ago, the secondary had 15 interceptions. 4 of those came from Beanie, 4 of those came from Beanie, and 5 of those came from Dante Jackson, right?
Right.
And you had only 1 from Minkah. You only had 1 from Porter. You had a bunch of people with 1 outside of that. And maybe they view this as an addition by subtraction to some degree, especially if you look at it just from a 1-from-1 from Jalen and Minkah. Look, Jalen's up there obviously in age, but he's still a very physical player, can move all around that defense, can blitz off the edge, can play in the slot. He's going to make it tough on those quarterbacks trying to complete those short in-outs. If you will, physical tackler and on top of that. And, at their core, they obviously do, or else they wouldn't have made the move. They do view this as, an addition by subtraction, so to speak, when it comes to Minkah overall, I think.
Yeah, now when you say addition by subtraction, you don't mean this in a Pickens sense where Fitzpatrick is a problematic player.
No. I'm just talking about an addition because of the addition by his subtraction, with the addition being Jalen.
Yeah, and I think they get 2 players, Johnny Smith.
I think Minkah's a fine guy. I mean, really, he speaks when something's on his mind, but I've never viewed. I mean, you go back to who was one of George Pickens' biggest cheerleaders on the sideline. Minkah was, and Minkah would only speak out when it was really necessary. And he said some very meaningful things over the year. No, I'm not in a sense calling Minkah any type of a cancer or anything like that.
Right, I knew. I wanted just to clarify because of how some might interpret the addition by subtraction comment, but I think Pittsburgh thinks they can get 2 versatile players that can help them offensively and defensively, make them more multiple on both sides of the football. They see value in that. I still have clear reservations about this trade, but I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes and their thought process of why this move took place. We got a $5 super chat from Ryan Rifle 4887. Says I would donate more, but now I have to get my girl a new jersey. Rip Minkah. Appreciate that, Ryan. Donated plenty. We appreciate and are grateful for donations of any amount. And yeah, that Minkah jersey out the window. Maybe get a DK Metcalf one. That's a guy that might be one of the few players who feels safe in Pittsburgh for the long haul.
I don't know. I mean,
fair.
You better be. I mean, obviously, I think DK is going to be here for at least the next 2 seasons, but and hopefully a lot longer than that. But I don't know. Things seem to have an expiration date a lot quicker than what they used to, right?
Yes, maybe a nice Jerome Bettis. Go with an old player that cannot be traded. Maybe that's the route to take there, Ryan. Thank you for the super chat. Let's go back to the questions here. John Pennington, our friend, says, hello, Dave and Alex, and what a day. What does this day mean for Connor and the UDFA tight ends they signed, along with Patterson? If anything, what players could be hurt by today's trade on offense and defense? Well, Connor Hayward, I think, is one of those players that got hurt by today's trade, where you now have 3 tight ends you can lock in Freiermuth and Washington and Jonnu Smith. Now Arthur Smith may carry 4 tight ends as they did last year, but now you're competing with DJ Thomas-Jones, the rookie, the Skullbreath, and any other potential additions. And so Hayward really only has the special teams path. There is no real offensive role. He struggled to find a fit a year ago, a guy that will enter camp, I feel like, very much on the bubble.
If I was him, I would not miss Danny Smith's birthday if that comes up between now and week 1. And look, I mean, his usage in the passing game was down last year. Now he did obviously play a lot of special team snaps, and I mean he's got great hands. They just when it and look, I thought his blocking was okay, especially I mean in times when he's asked to come across on some split zones and cut. That's okay, but I mean at 6 foot or 6'1", whatever he is now,
5'11", 5'10", whatever. He's shorter.
Yeah, I mean you're not going to put that. That's not a guy you're going to want at the end of the line of scrimmage and one-on-one base block those ends. And you better be careful on how many times you do use him moving across the formation in split zone. And obviously, probably not going to see a lot of him at fullback. And once again, you got Jonnu Smith. You got a lot of mouths to feed at the tight end position. And supposedly, if you're going to get Washington involved a little bit more in the passing game as well, too, there's not a lot of snaps to carve out for Cameron Hayward. I mean, for Connor Hayward on offense as it is, barring injury. So he definitely is going to have to make a mark on special teams. And you do have to wonder if one of these other younger tight ends might give you the flexibility to do that. Maybe you're able to stash one of those guys on top of it on the practice squad. Mike, could we get into situations even where Connor Hayward does not make the 53, is not attractive to the teams across the league after getting cut, and he actually starts the season on the practice squad as a guy that maybe gets elevated for whatever reason, special teams, once the season gets underway? Is that a thought now?
Sure, that's possible. You can keep veterans on the practice squad, so not going to rule that out. Anybody else hurt? Anybody else internally currently on this roster hurt by today's move? I wrote about it briefly. For Steelers Depot, I put Beanie Bishop on that losers list, from pretty clear slot corner to backup. Maybe there's some snaps for him in sub packages. If Ramsey plays some safety, there's still probably some ways for Bishop to see the field, but his snap count just took a big hit.
Sure did. Yeah, I think that's a good call on that one as well, too.
Anybody else?
Let's see. I mean, you're going to obviously have Slay. You're going to have Brandon Eccles, you would think, on the roster. What does this do for? I mean, Trice. What's this do for Trice? I mean, Pierre's calling card is obviously special teams, so nothing really changes there, other than maybe a guy like Trice out special teaming him, right?
Right. With Trice, my thought was he's going to be the dime defender, the 6DB. That was his role before getting hurt last year. I still see him as that dime defender right now. If anything, the odds may go up if Juan Thornhill is playing, if he does become your starting safety, and that's no longer a sub-package guy.
Right. I think you hit the main kind of losers there with Hayward and Beanie.
Okay, there you go. Let's see what else we have here. Questions. And be sure to like this stream. I have over 100 people in the chat. Uncommon for June 30th, but it's been an uncommon June 30th overall. Eastside Legend says, glad Minkah is gone. Ronald Hall says, can't say the Steelers aren't trying to win now. Can't wait to see Jalen at slot corner and safety. Steelers got better today. So some people very much in favor of this trade. Dave says, imagine working the night shift last night and just waking up 20 minutes ago. It's a great point. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Just a quick aside, the Ramsey news comes in. We just hear Ramsey's going to Pittsburgh. I was excited. I saw the value in that. And then we kind of wondered, hey, where's the trade compensation on this thing? Why have we not heard what the details of this trade is? Usually that stuff comes out pretty much either at the same time or shortly thereafter. And then the Minkah news came in, and it was like, what is going on?
Yeah, I think probably you'd be at least you're getting all the news at one time if you just woke up and you get to see the full scope instead of it coming in like every 10 minutes like it did, first the Ramsey deal and then the compensation of Minkah and then, oh yeah, Jonnu Smith is getting traded there as well. So yeah, I definitely didn't have waking up to that on a Monday morning on the bingo card.
Time to move on from Minkah, says Deplorable. Glad they made the move. Ronald Hall says want for Terry McLaurin and a first-round pick. Who says no? Some trade rumors on TJ Watt picking up. Adam Schefter reporting Watt unhappy with his contract. Teams are discussing the idea of trading for Watt. Now, many reports, including from Schefter and Tom Pelissero, saying Pittsburgh has zero interest in trading away TJ Watt. But when you make a move like trading away a supposed defensive pillar like Minkah Fitzpatrick, I should say, then there's going to be some teams calling about TJ Watt. No surprise there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I know today was a bit surprising, and we've been surprised a couple of times this offseason and more times than in recent history in one offseason. I will really be totally shocked if they trade TJ Watt because I think you're going to see as this cap and cash the trade-off as all the final details come in from this, there's still going to be about a $20 million or so cash deficit that the Steelers want to fill this offseason, and that fits in perfectly with the Watt extension there. I will only go as far as to say that to indulge some people that are wanting Terry McLaurin, the only way I think that happens is if you do deal TJ Watt straight up for Terry McLaurin. Because because you're going to have to give Terry a new contract if you acquired him, and the only way I think that you make that work from what I think the Steelers want to spend cash wise is dumping one cash spending for another one, and that would be the only way I could really fathom Watt being gone and Scary Terry coming to Pittsburgh. But don't hold your breath on any. I've said all along I think this deal gets done with TJ Watt. Is it going to happen next week? Is it going to happen at the start of training camp? I'm not so sure about that. But by week 1, I fully expect TJ Watt to have his new deal in place.
I think it'll get done too. But I'm not going to sit there and write that in pen just because this offseason has shown a lot of things we thought would happen or would not happen or couldn't happen did occur. And you never know what could be next. Joseph says, do you think this is the beginning of more signings to come? I don't want to say Pittsburgh's done in terms of until week 1. Could you add a receiver? Gabe Davis likely to sign before training camp. Wouldn't be shocking if he was added. He's a veteran minimum contract. What do they do at free safety? You had a good suggestion, Dave. Justin Simmons, still a free agent, still a talented player, even though he's in his 30s. I think the massive deals are done, but could other additions occur? Sure.
Yeah, I think as far as the massive kind of cap shifting, cash shifting type moves now are done. I mean, look, if you go out and get Gabe Davis, that we talked about, you got the offsets involved with the Jaguars there, so that would cost absolutely nothing to do that. Justin Simmons, maybe he's got at least the minimum offers from other teams around the league out there. Maybe he's wanting a little bit stronger payday. And if indeed that's the case, and you think he contribute when it comes to the Steelers, maybe you would do something with a 2-year deal with him with just obviously the guaranteed money in year 1. But even so, it wouldn't be a huge move the needle type situation. It obviously would probably be for a little bit more than minimum. But if he wanted more than $3 or $4 million and you were comfortable with him for at least one season at that, why not do a 2-year deal with the hope that he can play a couple more years, But as far as things that are they might move the needle in the news wire, obviously because of, the name, kind of the name recognition. But as far as moving the needle, as far as a cap and a cash perspective, I think they're done there.
Still think an offensive lineman could and should be added, some depth there, and we'll see if another receiver does come in. I like Alec Pierce from the Colts. I'll bang that table all day until the trade deadline.
Okay.
Got a $2 super chat from Papa Trucka, who says Jalen Ramsey being used like Marlon Humphrey. I like that comparison. Humphrey's a guy that plays outside in base packages, kicks inside in slot situations, can travel and match up on number one players. He's physical. Yeah, I like that comparison.
I think the biggest thing is one of the biggest byproducts here is the flexibility of Jalen Ramsey. Heck, you can put him down in the box as a quasi inside linebacker if you absolutely needed to. He did a little bit of that, I think, with the Rams. You could definitely rush him off the edge. Man, how would you like that big guy coming at you off the edge on some blitzes?
6 tackles for a loss last year and a sack.
He can play the run. He can play the short areas. I imagine occasionally you could do some confusing stuff and rotate him back to the middle of the field. And I think if he stays healthy, and it will be interesting to see how the true free safety position shakes out over the next couple of weeks here. But at the very least, I think the thing to get excited about is the defense, at least on the back end, should be a lot less predictable because we've seen, even though Deshaun Elliott's better closer to the box, and you're probably going to want him down low more times than not. You do have the ability to rotate him. Yeah, to me, I think you could do a lot more stuff pre-snap and confuse quarterbacks instead of quarterbacks trying to really focus on Minkah and where he's at now. They're going to have to be concerned of a lot of moving pieces within this thing. And I think overall, that's the Steelers' thoughts on this is it allows them to be a lot more versatile, do a lot more things pre-snap and post-snap. And you can move Jalen all over that damn defense, really.
Sure, you can. I still feel like Minkah allowed this defense to be multiple and versatile and present different looks. And whenever he was in his heyday and in his prime, you were doing those things. And I think he even did some of those things last year still. So I get your point. I get the multiplicity of this defense. There's some interesting guys that can wear a lot of hats. Corey Trice Jr., Jalen Ramsey, Warren Thornhill. These are big guys. They're athletic. They're physical. You can align them in a lot of different places, and that's interesting and fun. But, you need some principles. Communication was an issue last year. When you're more multiple, that stresses and heightens the need to communicate more. Pittsburgh's defense has been built on play fast, play free. Maybe they're changing that. Maybe they think they need to mix up their approach. But there are some consequences to these new pieces that can play a bunch of different roles. All right. And also I want to say it's evident, I feel like, but I know Mike Tomlin loves Jalen Ramsey, and I'm sure whenever he talks about Ramsey for the first time, he'll talk about loved him coming out of Florida State, blue chip prospect. Knew we could never draft him, but so happy to get him in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform now. And so I think Tomlin certainly reveres Jalen Ramsey, and like DK Metcalf, and like when they traded for Minkah, those are guys like, hey, we're going to get this guy because we love him coming out of the draft.
Another thing I was on with Dave Weekly for kind of an emergency spot on his radio show earlier today. And, the good thing with Ramsey, much in the same way as Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers talked about this as well too. He at mandatory minicamp, he saw the built-in leadership of this team already there, and that'll take a little bit of stress off of Aaron Rodgers of having kind of being the face of the franchise, like he was to the degree in New York. Now, obviously, Aaron Rodgers is still going to assume a leadership role on offense. And should, with the veteran years that he's played and knowing the position and all like that. But much like with Jalen Ramsey here, he was a captain, I think, for multiple years throughout his career. Now he doesn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You got guys like obviously Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, and I mean, you've got even Alex Highsmith has been there you've got people that stand up and answer the hard questions and be more of the face in the leadership role. Now Jalen can just come in and just find his place in that locker room and just worry about playing ball.
I agree, but this is a team that has made a lot of changes. This is a roster that looks much different than last year. Even before the Minkah trade, they were replacing over 8,100 snaps from a year ago. Now they're pushing over 9,000. It's literally the Dragon Ball Z meme of over 9,000.
9,000.
That's impossible, but it is possible this year. So there's a lot of change, and a lot of those pillars have been removed, and the biggest to fall has been Minkah Fitzpatrick. He was one of the three pillars. We talked about Pittsburgh's defense. It was three guys you build around at each level, essentially. Hayward along the defensive line, Watt on the edge, and Minkah at free safety. Felt like those were the guys, those were your structures, and that has changed. And Dave, to your point, you made this comment, I think last week a couple times, this defense up the spine. It's a whole lot. It's a lot riding on that group. But Benton in his third year, Queen in his second year in Pittsburgh, and then whatever the plan is at free safety.
Yeah, but when I'm talking about Ramsey, I'm just talking more from the leadership role. From
but who's your leader in the DB room right now? Is it Slay?
I mean, he's obviously been there the longest now. I mean, you got you obviously, and look, he's probably one to be a little bit more vocal than Ramsey, I would think.
I mean, I think Ramsey's a vocal guy. He's like a trash talker. I don't know what his style of leadership really is. I think Slay will be that veteran presence in the secondary, but I think Ramsey will have a role to play too, because there's some other young guys in there, in Porter and Bishop, Trice, etc.
Yeah, but I'm talking more about the fact of having to, the first one after every game, and they're answering questions and all like that. Just more of the built-in leadership on that defensive side of the football. He doesn't have to come in there right away and take ownership of the complete defense is what I'm talking about.
Sure, right. That'll be a Watt thing. That'll be certainly a Hayward thing. I'm with you there. Charles Munger, 8737, $10 super chat. Thank you so much for the super chats today. He says, I expect TJ Watt to get 10 sacks this year at 31 years old. I argue spending more than 15 to 20 million is too much for 10 sacks. Do you see Watt getting cut next offseason if he gets 10 sacks or less? I don't. I mean, I guess this assumes an extension. I mean, I think Pittsburgh does want to make Watt a one helmet guy in Pittsburgh. Now, if he's 35, does he have a Franco year where he goes somewhere? Who knows? But I expect Watt to be here for the long term.
Charles, all I got to say is they're going to give TJ more than 15 to 20 million.
That's also true.
I mean, I can listen, obviously, and have listened to arguments, people saying there's no way they should give him 40 million or anywhere close to that. Okay. I mean, I'll listen to those arguments, but the reality of it is that that's going to end up what he's getting paid. And yeah, I mean, 10 sacks, you obviously hope he gets a lot more than 10 sacks this year.
Right. 11.5 last year. You would hate to see that. It certainly won't quiet the concerns about TJ Watt if that's the season he has. And if he has 10 sacks, it has a good chance he was probably hurt in some respect, either missing time or playing through injury as he did last year. And that also will be an ominous sign for his future. Destiny Collins, more of a comment, but I want to present this to you, Dave. He says, or she says, I'm not sure either way, but he says, quote, I mean, this team is not a contender, and I don't think the guys they've traded for will be around when they are a contender again. They should be rebuilding for a Super Bowl. In the AFC, is it fair to say Super Bowl contender teams are the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills? Is that a fair assessment, Dave?
Yeah, that sounds about right as far as the upper echelon. Yeah.
Is Pittsburgh in that group? And if not, how close are they to joining that group?
I mean, they definitely are they are doing everything they can to shake this thing up to at least present that they think that they can compete. This is a tough division overall. Bengals, Ravens are going to be in this thing. You would think in the AFC North. I'm going to have to see a little bit. I want to find out what the free safety plan is. Look, without a doubt, you expect this defense to be good, top 10, right? They better be better against the run and up the spine. If they're not, all bets are off, right?
Sure.
Their offense, as far as that goes, I envision rock throwing on steroids to some degree. Obviously they're still going to want to push the football down the field with Aaron Rodgers, much in the same way that they did at points with Russell Wilson last year. They've got to be able to run the football. Do they, on paper, if they stay healthy on that offensive line takes the next step forward like many hope they do. If they're able to run, there's a lot of if-thens. If they're able to run the football, if Rodgers does not sack 40 times, if Rodgers has 2.5 to 1 interception ratio, if this offense can start much faster than it has in previous years. The defense obviously has to be top 10. We've got to see 20 plus takeaways, I think, from the defense. They have, I think, the players on this team now to accomplish that. Is just about making it all work. And I'm just not there where I'm able to say this is a Super Bowl caliber team.
I'm with you. And so it does question about where this trade takes Pittsburgh. But I want to get to it. My many apologies from Tony, who had that very generous...
Let me retouch real quick on kind of what he said too. And look, they kind of view it as own it to themselves with these older guys on this team, and Hayward and Watt, and obviously no longer Minkah. But they are trying to go all in on this, but on top of it too, they had the cash to do what they did this year. So it made sense to try to try to add to what they already had with the core, and then try to make it better, because for lack of a better term, they had to spend the cash this year. So, and then, and I think that's what you saw. I mean, if they were just going to lay down, then they would have set themselves up in a situation next year where they might have to absolutely spend cash in directions than players that don't necessarily deserve it. And you want to talk about really overpaying potentially on some outside guys, most notably next year. They would have really had to do that had they not, if they don't get in a situation where they're spending more than 100% of the cap total in cash this year. So I think this is a byproduct of a lot of things this year, year two of the three-year CBA. And look, I mean, you could do worse than that on a veteran quarterback in Aaron Rodgers at what, $13-14 million, with his cap number. You could do worse than DK Metcalf adding to that room. You could do worse for adding a guy like Jalen Ramsey, and Jonnu Smith to that room. So I think you got to look at this from multiple angles, with the fact that this team absolutely had to spend cash and this offseason, and going into the offseason, you kind of wondered who they were going to spend that cash on.
I want to respond to that, but I want to get to Tony's question, because I completely missed this. Sometimes the chats can be delayed and I have to refresh the page on my phone. So I apologize, Tony, with that very generous super chat. I want to get to his question, and then I want to get back to what you said, Dave. But he has a two-part question. It says, question one, Alex, would you like this trade better if they signed Simmons for free safety? And then two, Dave, don't you think Omar is saying hold my beer to the rest of the North? Would I like this better if they add Simmons? Yeah, they have a more defined free safety. They add a player. That picture becomes a little bit clearer. Would I still like it overall? I'll say Simmons is still a short-term thing, and what does he have left, and how do all these new pieces fit and coalesce? Sometimes some of the parts can be not indicative of individual talent, and how you fit, and the chemistry and communication issues we saw last year can all be problematic. But what are your thoughts on part two of Omar saying, hold my carbonated beverage?
I once again, I think it's a situation of and I said this even after Aaron Rodgers signed, and even after Deshaun Elliott signed an extension, this team still had a lot of cash to spend above and beyond an extra, $20 million for Watt as part of his as part of an extension for him. I still I think what they're doing is an effort to add as many pieces as they can by subtracting as few pieces as they can. And shifting the cash expenditure on top of it. And then plus, you want veteran players. You're putting together a veteran roster to make to kind of make a run at this thing on top of it. So I don't think it's so much of him looking around and telling the other teams in the AFC North, hold my beer. I just think this was kind of the plan, that they wanted to spend cash and had to spend cash, and they wanted to make a run at this thing with some experienced players.
Yohan Hernandez, by the way, has a $5 super chat. Says, not sure about Ramsey, but Slay feels like he's there to also be a mentor to this young cornerback room, at least I hope. And yes, absolutely. That is a huge reason why Slay's in Pittsburgh, like Patrick Peterson. It's a mentor role. It's one that Slay embraces, but I think Slay has more talent and more legs and more life left than Peterson had 2 years ago. I don't want to spend the last 15 minutes on this, Dave, but from the cash aspect, like, Aaron Rodgers is not about a cash move because that's a cheap quarterback contract. Jalen Ramsey is not about a cash move because you're trading Minkah on the other side. If you wanted to add cash, you could have taken on Ramsey and traded something else and retained Minkah Fitzpatrick. Trading away George Pickens is obviously not a cash-related move. The only cash-related move I see here is DK Metcalf. That is the big money deal of the offseason. So this, to me, is not about a cash mission. And even to your point about the core, this is not about building around the core. To me, this is replacing the core. This is replacing so many of the integral pieces and trying to kickstart this team by bringing in new blood. Now, yes, Kim Hayward's still there and TJ Watt is still there, but those are the only two guys. Everything else is changing around it. So this, to me, is a different conversation than that.
No, well, here's the thing, though. You still had to spend the cash. If you weren't going to give that money to George Pickens, you had to give it to somebody, I mean, you're talking $35 million in cash.
Right, yeah, the Metcalf thing is cash-related, but that's the only cash-related move they've made this offseason.
I mean, they bumped up the cash a little bit on, all these little bits add up. The Elliott thing was an additional cash spending in 2025. That way, who else? I mean, to some degree, you go out and you give. Even though it was you spent a little bit on a guy like Thornhill, not crazy, but I mean, you had a little bit of cash there. You had Mason Rudolph ate up a little bit of cash there. The thing is, you still have to spend the cash,
right? But they're not being driven by the cash. This isn't about cash. This is just general free agent additions they would have made in any year, regardless of their cash situation.
Well, they weren't going to make some of these moves outside. Had they re-signed, let's say, Justin Fields and given that money to George Pickens.
Right, but they would have spent more cash had they done those things. So cash is not the reason why those players are not in Pittsburgh. The reasons, to me, is this is a team that has won 9 and 10 games each of the last 4 years, has not won a playoff game since 2016, has lost their last 6 postseason games. That's tied for the longest streak in the NFL. It's their longest postseason victory drought since the merger. They feel like they need to make some radical moves to get some radically different results. To your point on the podcast, this is to avoid that definition of insanity, to do something different to hopefully get different results.
Right, and that's why I mentioned within there, because I think that was the plan, to add veterans along in there. Is it all cash driven? No, they want to make this roster better, and they feel they owe it to themselves, to these veteran guys on the roster, to go a more veteran route on top of it. And plus, look, like it or not, you have to spend the cash still.
Right, but they're not being driven by the cash mission.
No, it's not 100. And I don't think I ever said it's 100% driven by the cash. But I don't think you can lose sight of the fact, like he was saying, that he wishes that they just would have tanked and not done as much as they've done. Because they would have really been in a situation next offseason when it comes to absolutely being 160% over the cap in cash.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah, you don't want to put yourself in that box where you have to spend the money. That's how you make bad decisions. I'm with you there. All right, let's go to Cavs 23.
Yeah,
Rocks.
I don't think you're totally embracing kind of the overall thought that I had. I mean, overall message that I had within that.
How much do you think cash played into a role in all these decisions besides Metcalf?
I
say very little to none.
look, if they would have paid Aaron Rodgers, close to $20 million this year, that would have probably put them in a situation where they probably wouldn't have Ramsey on this roster now.
I think
So
I disagree. I think they would have restructured a Pat Fryermuth or an Alex Highsmith or opened up a door another way.
I'm not convinced they would have.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Cavs23 Rock says, so what is the plan at free safety now? That's the outstanding question. Same feeling as when they traded Deontay from the receiver room. We'll see. Does Ramsey get snaps there? You have Thornhill. Is there an outside addition? I think some of this is to be determined.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how this shakes out.
Yeah, it's one of the outstanding questions for sure. Jay Wilson, wasn't Minkah the one who had issue with the defensive game plan against the Ravens in the playoffs? If so, I wonder if he's another victim of challenging the head coach and his philosophy. I don't remember. Do you remember Minkah making any particular comments about the game plan in the wild card game?
I'm trying to remember back. Not right off the top of my head. I'm not saying it didn't. I'd have to go back and research that.
I don't think this is retribution, though, for anything he may have said internally or externally. I think this is just maybe them thinking that he is not the player that he was, and they didn't feel like he was going to be a long-term piece with his contract up after 2026. And even if him getting to that point may have been a question in the team's mind. Let's see what else we have here. Is there something from Jerry Dulac? I just saw an article went up on the site. Let's see really quickly if Dulac has something going on. Lack of splash plays didn't mesh with his salary, and so maybe that is the thought. It says Steelers were not actively trying to trade Minkah Fitzpatrick, but they were willing to listen to any team who showed interest. They felt the absence of splash plays the past 2 years was not commensurate with what they were paying him, and obviously
that's easy to say after the fact, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a lot of armchair reporting after this fact, but I mean, yes, obviously 2 picks.
They all knew it was coming.
Right. The rumors were out there for months, and no one said a peep until the trade actually happened. But yes, 2 picks in the last 2 years. Now, I think 2023, he was hurt. He was misused. I gave him a pass on that. Last year, he was not the Minkah that he had been and what Pittsburgh needed him to be. I don't debate that point.
You got to have more than 2 takeaways over the course of the last 2 seasons.
Right. I think he could have gotten back to being his Minkah self. The team clearly thought otherwise. Let's see what else we have here. Any other? I'm sure we have other questions. And thank you guys so much.
Someone earlier said something about we're not talking enough about Jonnu Smith, and we made sure in the podcast at one point to say, oh yeah, Jonnu Smith was part of this, and yeah, I mean that part of this deal absolutely does need to be discussed. I think they got better on offense, and as Alex and I, if Jonnu Smith was the only thing that ended up happening. Out of was the only player traded today or acquired. A lot of that was more plausible and I guess a lot easier to smell potentially coming. You had the history with Arthur Smith dating back to Tennessee. We know Arthur Smith likes to 2, 3, sometimes even four tight ends in this thing. This team lost Donald Parham to an injury, and you could smell that one at least coming a little bit more than actually seeing what happened with the Ramsey for Minkah swap, if you will. Look, this is a good ad for the offense. You get a guy that's essentially a wide receiver / tight end type guy. You can do multiple things with him, and now you can continue to do multiple things with Pat Fryermuth as well too. Move those guys around, and I kind of liken it to years ago back when the Patriots had their multiple Gronk and Hernandez, and how they used to destroy people with 12 and 13 personnel. You want to go small and throw your nickel and stuff out there. We'll just collapse this thing down, and we'll out physical and run on you that way. You want to bring the big boys out there and try to match up with the bigger offensive personnel groupings. No problem. We'll split these guys out and we'll shred you with a matchup on a tight end on a safety or a tight end on a linebacker or something like that. So that's obviously what I think Arthur Smith's kind of betting on now at this point. Run a lot of 12, a lot of 13 personnel. You got a big boy in Darnell Washington. The defense wants to throw out a big package out there. Aaron will hopefully audible and spread things out against them. They want to run the nickel out there to collapse it down and try to slap them around with the run.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's about being multiple and having answers to no matter what the defense does. You come out in 12 personnel or 13 personnel. How does the defense play? Do they want to stay in base? Do they want to go nickel? Do they want to go with a big safety package? You're going to stress them and be able to have a counter punch to any defensive grouping that you see. And so we did discuss Johnny Smith a little bit on the live stream, but we talked about him so much throughout the last couple of weeks because he was the popular name that was tossed around in trade talks, and the Arthur Smith connection runs deep. Dave, you talked about that early in the live stream, and I noted that Pittsburgh had the second highest use of 13 personnel last year, but they were 21st in success rate and effectiveness, and so those numbers don't mesh. And so now you become a lot stronger when you deploy 13 personnel with Bryan, with Washington, and now Jonnu Smith.
Now it's up to, you got that kind of personnel. We know Arthur Smith likes to run that stuff, and you got to back a couple of backs back there now that you think you can run almost any type of zone or outside, inside. It's up, and this offensive line is expected to take this next jump forward. So the makings are there, but we gotta see the baby now.
Right, and that's a really important thing that I've mentioned too. I was on a podcast for another show today mentioning that point, that lost in all the, for lack of a better phrase, glitz and glamour of the receivers and the secondary and the outside guys, the definition and the litmus test of this team's progress will be with its offensive line, with its young group they've invested so much in. Broderick Jones, Trey Fautanu, Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier. That group has to develop, has to become a top 10 unit for Aaron Rodgers' benefit, for the offense's benefit, and for the team's benefit. And we should note here, Jerry Dulac saying their Steelers' new defensive plan will include Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, and Joey Porter Jr. on the field all the time, with few exceptions per source. And so that's what Dulac sees as all three being on the field most of the time.
Well, you're paying Slay $10 million, and Ramsey's we'll see what his cap number is, but his cash is going to be way up over $10 million for this year. And then obviously Joey Porter ain't going anywhere, so you're going to see. I don't think that's easy or hard to decipher that you're going to see those guys out there a lot.
Right. The question is how will they be used? Where will they align? And when you're in your base 3-4. Is it Ramsey playing safety? Is he playing down? Is it three corners and one safety with those three guys and Elliott as your free safety? A lot of questions there. Before the addition of Jonnu, I thought the Steelers needed a big slot type of guy that could be Rodgers' quick trigger guy, a la Lazard. Now it seems it's back to a speed Z type like Gabe Davis, right? Yeah, I think offensively, if you're adding another piece, it's that playmaker, that field stretcher like a Gabe Davis.
Yeah, you're not expecting them to break the bank on it now at this point, though, right?
Right, and Davis would not do that. He'll sign for the minimum because Jacksonville is on the hook for his contract. The Frozo 619, do you agree that Minkah was a problem when forced to cover man-to-man? Problem might be a stretch, but he was not that good in man-to-man coverage last year.
Right.
So, I listen, maybe I'm overvaluing Minkah. I've gotten some comments about that. Maybe so. But I thought he could bounce back. And I said, last year was not, he did not deserve to make a Pro Bowl last year. He made that because, as you said, the popularity contest or name recognition, whatever it was. He didn't finish high in the fan voting. I guess it was peers that got him in, but he didn't deserve to make the Pro Bowl. He was still a good player, but he was not his Minkah self, not just in the lack of splash, but also just in coverage. What else do we have here? Let's see. Trying to find our next question. Couple minutes left. We'll maybe go a little bit over today. What else? Trying to find one. What young player or players can benefit from today's signing, if any? The young players who can benefit. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a young player in particular. Again, I think Slay was really brought in to be the mentor, but you can watch somebody like Ramsey's work and his approach. I mean, I think all the young guys can benefit from that.
Right. I don't know. I mean, obviously Joey Porter gets another. He's got to be ecstatic to learn from guys like Slay and Ramsey now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great group around him. How proven is Arthur Smith's system? I don't know if you're asking Smith in particular, or the overall system, as in that kind of tree, the Matt LaFleur, Shanahan-like tree? If you're asking that bigger, broader question, then yeah, I think it's pretty proven from the success the Packers have had and Shanahan's had offensively. And Smith himself, I think, has shown with the right pieces, of course, you need the right personnel, you can have a successful offense. Look at the Titans his first couple of years, his 2 years as OC.
It's a big year for him, right?
Well, yes, but when you say big year, is there a consequence if it's not a big year for Arthur Smith?
Well, I mean, do you expect Aaron Rodgers back? And he's already said he thinks that this is going to be his final year. If Broderick Jones doesn't take a step forward, you do have to kind of wonder what's going to happen over there. What's your wide receiver room? I mean, it feels like instead of matching the system to the personnel, it feels more and more like Arthur Smith's trying to make the players match his system, right?
Yes, but that's not a bad thing necessarily. And you're not saying it's a bad thing.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there's a home run by somebody.
Pirates game?
Hortz. Yeah, Hortz just hit one out.
Second of the season, I think. But like if the season isn't great offensively, does Arthur Smith get fired in the offseason? I don't think so.
All right.
I mean, feel free to disagree. They don't fire. I mean, Matt Canada got a longer leash.
Sure.
You know? I mean, it's a 3-year contract, and so I think Smith will be back. I think the only way Arthur Smith is not back as OC is if he becomes a head coach somewhere. And if the season goes great and he gets interest and offers and takes a job elsewhere, unless it is truly just a complete mess, I think he returns in 2026. Now, will he get an extension? No. Will he be signed, again? Probably not, but that's how I think it goes.
All right. I'm excited to see Jonas Smith in this offense, to be honest with you.
No, I am too. I mean, I'm excited for Ramsey. Like, I know I'm coming out harsher on the Minkah trade and more skeptical than maybe Dave is, but like, I'm excited by Ramsey. I think he can make some plays. I think he will have a positive impact, definitely, but it's at what cost, and it's at, did your team get better overall? All right, let's check for any other questions. I'm sure we have a couple to round things out. Let me scroll back up. Joke there, can Jalen Ramsey play receiver? The Frozo says he probably could if you asked him to. What else do we have here? Ramsey can teach the young guys how to trash talk for sure. Let's see. Tyrell Swan says, on the pod, Alex said Ramsey Johnny would return early day 3 picks. What would 39 net in draft capital return? I believe Alex previously said 90 may only get you a second. How much more than day 3 for 39? So he's saying, okay, what would Minkah get as return on that if you were to trade Minkah Fitzpatrick?
Oh, I mean, if they were just to trade Minkah straight up.
Yeah, if you were shopping Minkah Fitzpatrick, what would his value be in a vacuum?
I mean, I think a second or a third, because he does have the 2 years left on his contract, but he is coming off of 2 years where he only forced 2 turnovers, right? And he did miss 6 games in there, so I think you got to piece all this together. I mean, no way would I have traded him for less than a third. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, 100% on that.
You weren't going to get a first-round draft pick for him.
No. The question is, what is the in between? Now, to be clear, when I said on Watt, I debated about would Watt fetch a first, only and primarily because of the contract a team would have to give him. That is a big hang-up in a deal. And I didn't say Watt would only go for a second. I said he would probably go for a second, a player, and then some other picks. So like a second, a fourth, and a player. Not a star, but a Romeo Dubs type of guy was kind of the outline, very roughly and loosely I gave. I think Minkah, if he were to be traded in a vacuum, what was his true value? A second or a third is my guess.
Right.
Just straight up that one lone pick. That's how I view that.
Look, to go once again and circle back to almost what we started with at the top of this thing too. The Steelers got all this done without giving up any 2026 draft capital.
which I think, again, signals they are looking all in at quarterback next year. Will they get him? Who knows, but they're going to pursue it. Is the plan to eventually transition Ramsey to safety? I think he'll play some safety this year. I don't know if it's not going to be a full-time switch, I wouldn't expect, but I think he'll get safety reps. Our defensive charting should be really interesting. What happens? I kind of want to get through this year before I talk about anything longer term.
Right.
Because you said it's kind of a year-to-year thing with Ramsey contractually, right?
I imagine the way some of these early numbers are reporting that there's not going to be any guaranteed money past this year. And if that's the case, then how he plays this year will determine whether or not they want him back next year. I mean, obviously he's under contract through 2028, but if there's no guaranteed money, you could just walk away from that, obviously. So I think it's way too early to be looking ahead to 2026 with him. It all depends on how he plays. Does he stay healthy? I mean, you're not going to get rid of a guy if he plays in all 17 games and garners you 4 or 5 interceptions and I don't know 60 tackles or whatever, a couple of sacks, couple of tackles for. I mean, it should be pretty black and white versus what his salary will be on the books next year versus whether or not he's worth it or not.
Right. Dark Shine the Kid says, any chance Queen is gone? He made some cryptic posts last week. I don't think I saw those posts, but I think he's
not
here.
Gone this offseason, but I mean, obviously he needs to have a better season this year, or else you're going to call into question his 2026 salary.
Agreed. That's what I was going to say, that if he doesn't play well, if the run defense doesn't improve, if the communication issues persist, if he can't do the green dot and play to his standard individually, there's a conversation, okay, give the keys to Peyton Wilson in 2026. Let's see, DM Sawyer, they are not looking all in a quarterback next year. They are all in this year. I don't say they're all in terms of trading assets for 2026 picks, but when this year's over, they're going to be looking at all the quarterbacks in next year's draft. I think there's no debate about that.
Right.
So if you disagree, if you feel like they're not even going to have interest in the quarterback next year, you can have that opinion, but I would strongly disagree. Anything else? Minkah made so many game-saving tackles over the years. When a free safety leads a team in tackles, then you know the D-line and linebacker have problems. That's from Johnny Pastrana. Yeah, Minkah was a great tackler, and that is an underrated part of this, that the splash plays had gone away, but his tackling was consistent and excellent, and replacing that will be key.
Yeah, look, he made a couple right at the sticks a couple of times over the last couple of seasons, right? That prevented first downs on either third or fourth down and all like that. And yeah, although he is a guy that can easily rack up 90 to 100 tackles for you in a season, I'd rather not see him have to make 90 or 100 tackles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 124 he had, what was that, 2 years ago was insane and indicative of a front seven not playing like it should. But it also just speaks to, can a defense be on the field less? Can your offense be on the field more? Because I wonder how many, can you look this up quickly, Dave? How many tackles did Minkah have the first month of last year, weeks 1 through 4? That would have been the Falcons game.
I already remember that the best part of his season last year seemed to be the first 6 games.
True.
So you want to know specifically last year how many tackles he had in the what?
First 4 games of the year. How many
first
combined
4 combined tackles? He had 11 and 14, 25. And if you include the game against Dallas, 11, 4, 20. He had 35 combined tackles because he had 10 in that game against Dallas in week 5. That's a lot of tackles.
How many did he have, though, the first 4? 24, you said?
25.
25?
Combined.
So that averages out to 6 and change per game? Yeah. I'm just trying to think where his tackles down, because Pittsburgh's defense was barely on the field the first month. And obviously, if your defense is on the field, they have to make fewer plays. There's less put on them, and guys are just making fewer tackles. Maybe not. Maybe that's not a good point. I wanted to at least explore that, but probably disregard the idea. Anything else here? Mike, I haven't been able to listen to the pod yet since it was posted so late, but hat tip to Jens for getting the Bungles guy on. I'm excited to learn more about what's going on there. Yeah, Shane Morrison, unfortunately, we would have had more time to talk about that otherwise, but great interview at the end of the podcast about the Bengals, who have had an exciting and interesting offseason too.
Yeah, we had about 32 minutes with him, covered a lot of different bases with him, and he's just a great guest. And I think we're going to have the Ravens beat writer on the Wednesday show, and then round it out with hopefully Scott Petrak to talk about the Browns on Friday.
Right, so super excited for that. So let me check one last time for any other final questions. I think we basically got them all, or at least most of them. Nothing new coming in. So tremendous turnout tonight, Dave. Consistently over 100 people. I still see 130 here in the chat right now. We have so much more coverage coming for you guys. Still so much to dig into when it comes to this Blockbuster Monday on this June 30th. So, Dave, thank you for being here. Chat, thank you for being here. Thank you for all the great super chats. And again, Dave, appreciate your time.
All right, appreciate you moderating this in the excellent way you do every other Monday. Appreciate boy, tons of people. We can't thank you enough for showing up, taking time out of your Monday night. A lot of great questions. Sorry we didn't get to everybody in this tonight, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And once again, great questions, and peace and love to all of you.
For those wondering, Steelers Depot Jeopardy, Episode 2. For those who watched the first episode, we appreciate that. Got really good feedback. That is going to come out now, I think, on Wednesday. It was going to be tomorrow, but I think I'll give a day gap to let everything breathe from today. So, Bryan was on Episode 2. Was he the big winner? You guys will have to find out. But there'll be that on Wednesday. That'll be on the site as well. There'll be an archive version of this live stream on Steelers Depot in just a little bit. Also will appear on the channel. So thank you guys so much. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the site, SteelersDepot.com. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.